With the total solar eclipse arriving on April the 8th, I decided to get in the mood with a guide to Terraria's solar eclipse event. This video will cover everything you need to know about the solar eclipse event. So then, what is the solar eclipse event? For starters, the solar eclipse is an event that has a 1 in 20 chance to spawn every morning after one mech boss has been defeated. But ignore that statistic, instead follow this rule. The solar eclipse will always spawn at whatever time is the least convenient for you. I'm so excited to be fighting these guys again. Oh my god, this event is so good. Assuming you do want one, they can be summoned with the solar tablet. The event also of course disables sleeping and ignores town spawn reduction. The spawning of the event will accompany the status message a solar eclipse is happening. If playing on Don't Dig Up or Get Fixed Boy worlds, it will instead be the horrors have arrived. The solar eclipse has 3 phases, starting from phase 1, which is after one mech boss has been defeated. During phase 1, the following enemies will spawn. First we have the Frankenstein, a reference to the 1931 film Frankenstein, and essentially acts as a faster zombie. Next up we have the Swamp Thing, a reference to DC's Swamp Thing, who made his first debut in the Swamp Thing. These enemies will stop periodically before running at you after being hit or just getting too close. After that we have the Vampire, a reference to the 1931 film Dracula. Fun fact, stakes do more damage to these enemies, so use them. They also turn into bats periodically. Next we have the Creature from the Deep, a reference to the 1954 film Creature of the Black Lagoon. When submerged in water, they can also swim. Next up, we have Fritz, a reference again to the 1931 film Frankenstein, being Frankenstein's hunchback assistant. All that these enemies do is run and jump. Next up we have the Possessed, a reference to the 1973 film The Exorcist. They mostly crawl on the ground, but they can also crawl on the walls like the spiders. The last enemy of the first phase is the Eyesore. This isn't a reference to anything, it's just a demon eye and a zombie put together. It shoots lasers out of its eyes and has high amounts of HP. Now on to Phase 2. Phase 2 begins after you beat all 3 mech bosses and only adds one enemy, that enemy being the Reaper. This enemy isn't a reference to any one piece of media in general, more of the concept of the Grim Reaper himself. They're also just kind of the Wraith's cracked up brothers. Now we enter Phase 3 though, which is post-Plantera. The first enemy added is Mothron, a reference to the 1961 Japanese film Mothra, along with the baby Mothrons that she spawns. Next up is the Butcher, a reference to Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They build up speed over time as they charge at the player. Up next we have the Deadly Sphere, a reference to the 1979 film Phantasm. When they get close to the player, they will very suddenly and quickly charge at them. Now we have the Dr. Manfly, a reference to the 1958 film The Fly, who throws a lingering toxic flask. Our second to last enemy will be the Nailhead, a reference to the 1987 film Hellraiser, who has a chance to shoot nails out of his head whenever hit. And now, our last enemy is the Psycho, a reference to the 1978 slasher Halloween. He can turn invisible until he gets hit or gets too close to the player. Now let's talk about the different drops, starting with the weapons separately. The first weapon is the Butcher's Chainsaw, which releases damaging sparks upon impact. It's pretty good for crowds, I guess. The nail gun is dropped by nailheads and shoots explosive nails, and I'm gonna be honest, they nailed it at this one. Next up, we have the Death Sickle from the Wraiths, not the Wraiths, the cracked Wraith, excuse me. Next up is the Psycho Knife, which allows you to go invisible, just like the Psychos, then swiftly attack your targets. This weapon isn't actually that good, but it's fun. Next we have the why can I not say this? It creates a cloud. Then we have the final yo-yo of the game, the Eye of Cthulhu, dropped by Mothron. Oh wait, Deadly Sphere Staff? It's actually not that bad, actually. One last mention would be the Broken Hero Sword, which allows you to make powerful weapons like the Terra Blade. That's actually the only weapon it allows you to make. However, these are not the only drops of the Eclipse. So now let's go over the 8 paintings that are dropped during the Eclipse. The first 2 paintings are both dropped by Eyesore, being the Eyesore Head painting and the Ocular Resonance painting. The next painting is dropped by both Frankensteins and Swamp Things, being the Buddies painting. Next up from Fritz, we have the Midnight Sun painting.
Next from the Possessed, you get the painting, This Is Getting Out of Hand.
Next from the Next from the Reaper, you can get the Requiem painting. And now, our last 2 paintings, A Machine for Terrarians, can be gotten from the Butcher, while the Wings of Evil painting can be gotten from Mothron. There are also 3 pieces of vanity, the Dr. Manfly set, the Butcher set, and the Eye Spring pet. Oh, and the Possessed also drops Steak. We now move on to one of our final categories, the accessories, starting with wings. The broken bat wings can be used to make bat wings, and the Mothron wings are dropped by Mothron. On top of this, the Moonstone is dropped by vampires, and the Neptune shell is dropped by creatures of the deep. Both of these accessories are used for the eventual crafting recipe in the Celestial Shell. Now, one last thing. Exclusive NPC shops. The Cyborg will start selling Rocket 4 and Cluster Rocket 2. The Steampunker will start selling purple or red solution depending on your world evil. And of course, if you ever want to skip this incredibly cringe event, you can always just use the sundial. And how about a bonus for making it this far? There's a scrapped enemy called the Severed Hand that never made it, that was of course a reference to the Addams family. So go out and enjoy your incredibly unrealistic event, considering that real solar eclipses are rare, only happen on full moons, are not. So I think the moral of today's video is don't use Terraria for your homework. Oh, and if you wouldn't mind, go outside.